Dr. Pritchard, what advice would you give to your 30-year-old self? Wow, that question came out of nowhere. We were on the freeway in a van about 60 seconds away from the Tampa airport. Turned out to be the most interesting question I have been asked in the last 2 years. More about that in a moment. If you have your copy of the Word of God, would you turn with me to Exodus chapter 5. Exodus 5 for the message entitled, When Nothing Goes Right. When Nothing Goes Right. While you're turning there, let me say how glad I am to be back here at the Shepherd's Church. Been here a number of times to speak. I love this church. Love this congregation. And my gracious, I love your choir, the orchestra. They knocked it out of the park this morning. My wife is watching from our home in Shawnee, Kansas this morning, and she texted me right after Crown Him with Many Crowns. Wow, what amazing music. And I was texting her at the same time from back there. This music is incredible. Special thanks to Pastor Steve for his kind words of introduction, and to your pastor, my good friend, Dr. Stephen Davey, for the invitation once again to speak here. It occurred to me that I come back in large part because I feel right at home here. And good to be with you this morning. So, it was Friday morning. I had just finished teaching the book of Daniel at Word of Life Bible Institute in Hudson, Florida. That's about 30 minutes north of the Tampa airport. And the way Word of Life does it is you fly in on Monday, you teach for 10 hours, you finish on Friday morning, you go to the airport, and you fly home. I had done it. I'd finished the book of Daniel. I was totally exhausted. Grabbed my bag, grabbed the computer, went to the Jack Wyrtzen Center at the Bible Institute campus. It was a Word of Life van. 2 young men were there, maybe early 20s, early 30s, doesn't matter, a lot younger than me. Word of Life staffers. There's a missionary there. I didn't catch his name, but he was from South America. So we loaded into the van, and those of you who have done something like this understand there are few feelings in life that are better than coming to the end of the week and all the work is done. And as we were going down the Suncoast Freeway, my mind was somewhere else. They were chattering, the other 3, and I was trying to stay out of trouble and mind my own business, and was thinking about checking in and going through security and getting to the gate and getting on the plane and flying home, and Marlene would meet me at the airport, and going home and sleeping in my own bed that night. And so we got about a mile away, and over on the left you can see the Tampa airport right there, and to get there you've got to take a right exit, and the exit doesn't go like this, it goes up in the air like it was a roller coaster ride. You go off to the right and up on the roller coaster, and when you come down you're only about 15 or 20 seconds away from being at the airport. And we were right there about to get on that roller coaster exit when the young man on the passenger side turned around and said to me, Dr. Pritchard, what advice would you give to your 30-year-old self? That is not an easy question to answer. What are you supposed to say? I mean, what do they want to hear? And it's made more difficult in my case by the absolute moral certainty that the 30-year-old me would pay no attention to anything the 69-year-old me had to say anyway. But we're up on the exit. You got to say something. So I just blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. Everything will work out, just not the way you expect. You ever had one of those moments where you realize you've let people down? They wanted something more, something catchy, Something Ben Franklin-esque, a stitch in time saves nine. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, or even one if by land, two if by sea. You know, something. And I just didn't get what they wanted. So now we're off the exit. We're 15, 20 seconds away. And I realized I've disappointed these good people. And then something just came to my mind. And I said, well, I heard this on the radio. A man said, the key to success in life is how well you adapt to plan B. They all started chuckling, and the missionary sitting next to me, he piped up and he said, oh, yes, every missionary knows that's true, because on the mission field, plan A never works. Plan B doesn't work. Plan C doesn't work. You got to get down to D, E, F, and G before you can find something that works. And so we were all laughing, and we got to the airport, and they let me off, and I knew that they were happy, and I was happy. I went inside and checked in and went through security and got to the gate. Had about an hour. And I sat there and I thought to myself, and you know what I decided? I decided I liked my first answer just fine. Everything will work out, just not the way you expect. In case you didn't know that, I dropped by this morning to tell you that. Everything will work out, guaranteed. It will not be the way you expect. That's how life is. You know who would understand this? Moses. Moses would understand. When we come to Exodus 5, he's 80 years old. And nothing in his life so far has worked out the way anybody would have expected. A baby in the bulrushes, found by Pharaoh's daughter, trained up in Egyptian society while his own people were slaving away out there in the land of Goshen. 40 years old, he kills that Egyptian and hides the body. Pharaoh finds out about it, and now Moses is on the lam and down there into the desert, and he sees the 7 sisters coming to get the water, and the shepherds are bothering them, and he fights them off. This time he doesn't kill anybody, and he meets Jethro and marries one of the girls, and then he's a shepherd, and then there's the burning bush, and God says, go back to Egypt. You got to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And he goes back to Egypt, and on the way some strange things happen. Nothing. When we get to Exodus 5, nothing makes a whole lot of sense yet in Moses' story. It will, but when we get to Exodus 5, it's not clear. You see, Exodus 5 is about a super confrontation between Pharaoh on one hand and Moses on the other. But as we're going to see, ultimately, it's between Pharaoh and God. I should give you the end of the sermon right here. It doesn't work out. It's a catastrophe. Everything blows up in Moses' face. I mean, this is an interesting question. Interesting. What do you do when you have done the will of God and it blows up in your face? What do you do when you've done the best that you know how? When you did what the pastor said to do. You followed the rules. You did what they said. And it blows up in your face. So if you're taking notes, write this down. When God is working, things often get worse before they get better. When God is working, check it out, it's in the Bible, you can see it. When God is working, things often get worse before they get better. God says, my ways are not your ways. So it is in the spiritual life. We have some dreams, some ideas, some plan, some hope. It's got to die before it can come back to life. Otherwise, we may say we did it on our own. You know the name J. Hudson Taylor, pioneer missionary to China, late 1800s, went to China, hostile to the Christian faith, and saw miracles in the face of unbelievable opposition. And J. Hudson Taylor said this: there are 3 stages in any great work attempted for God: impossible, difficult, done. When we come to Exodus 5, Moses is stuck in the impossible stage. 3 words tell us the story of Exodus 5. Word number 1, oppression. That's verses 1 through 14. Moses is 80. He's been gone from Egypt for 40 years. And by the way, there was one Pharaoh when he was born. There was another Pharaoh when he killed that Egyptian and hid the body. He was 40 years old. And now there's yet another Pharaoh when Moses is 80. And this new Pharaoh and Moses don't know each other. They've never met. Moses, at God's direction, goes to see Pharaoh, gives him God's message, and it blows up in his face. Verse 1, Moses and Aaron go and they say, God told us to tell you, let my people go. Look at verse 2. Here is Pharaoh's answer. Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, who is the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. Pharaoh said, I don't know this God. I don't know you, and I don't know this God. Well, he was right. He didn't know God. He was about to meet him. He did not know the Lord, so he wasn't going to obey him. And you read on down the next few verses. He says to Moses and to Aaron, you're just trying to trick me. You're going to get your people and you're going to leave, and I'm going to lose my slave labor. You're just trying to trick me, and your people are lazy. And so he says, here's what I'm going to do. You know, I've been giving you straw, your people straw to make the bricks. They've got to still meet the quota, but I'm not going to give any more straw. And now the Jews have got to scrounge all through the land of Egypt, get their own straw to make the bricks, but the quota is not going to change. Meanwhile, toward the end of that paragraph, we're told that the Egyptian slave drivers began to beat the Jewish foreman. You got to produce your full quota of bricks. You got to do it. Let me just say again. It's the question. It's the question hanging out here this morning. What do you do when you did right and it doesn't work? You followed the plan and it goes south. You did God's will. That is the question. First key word is oppression. Second key word is frustration. Verses 15 through 21. So the Jewish foremen, who have just been beaten by the Egyptian slave drivers, they come in to talk to Pharaoh. They think they know him. They're going to make a deal. They're going to try to be reasonable. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Pharaoh basically says, oh no, there's no failure to communicate. I know exactly what Moses said. I know exactly what you want. Look in verse 17. Pharaoh says, lazy. That's what you are, lazy. He repeats it twice. This is why you keep saying, let's go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work, verse 18. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks. There's a term for this, a modern term. This is called gaslighting. All of our politicians do it. All of them do it. It's when the politicians want to lie to us, but the only way they can do it is by blaming us for problems they have caused. That's gaslighting. Yeah. That happens every day here in America. Well, that's what's happening here. Pharaoh is gaslighting the Jews, blaming them for problems he's caused. So now, the Jewish foremen, having been beaten and then treated like this by Pharaoh, they go find Moses and Aaron. Verse 20, when they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And look at verse 21. And they said, that is, the Jewish foremen said to Moses and Aaron, God's men, may the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. Who'd the people blame? It's not Moses' fault, but he's the easy target. Listen, when you're tired, when you're angry, when you're bitter, when you're overworked, when you're upset, when you're attacked, when you're backed into a corner, you lose all spiritual perspective. And you say things you wouldn't otherwise say, and you do things you wouldn't otherwise do. So they blame Moses, whose only, quote, crime is that he tried to do God's will. There is a very important lesson here. When F.B. Meyer, the British Bible teacher, was writing about this passage, he said Moses has to learn the lesson, death to self. A lesson we all have to learn. Death to our dreams, death to our passions, death to our desires, death to our schemes, death to our hopes, death to all we think we should be doing. It's all got to die. Jesus said the same thing in John 12:24. Unless a grain of wheat is planted in the ground, unless it does, it dies alone. But if it's planted, it dies and brings forth what? Much fruit. Much fruit. We all have to die sooner or later. And I'm not talking about physical death. Death to our dreams and our hopes and our plans. So, another time, another place. You know why I'm looking up there? I can actually see this little event. I'm looking like it's painted on the wall. I'm looking at it right now. Long time ago, way back in the last century. Hundreds of miles from here. I was pastoring a church, and it was fermenting with trouble. Trouble had been brewing, and it was about to boil over. And I was doing everything I could to make things better, and it wasn't getting better. And finally, upon a day, a friend of mine came to me and said, Pastor Ray, you are holding on too hard. You've got to let go. And I said what we all say, oh, thank you so much for coming to see me. But I am not holding on too hard. But I was. And I was to learn the hard way that God begins to pry our fingers off of that which we think we can't live without. And eventually, God took back the thing that seemed so important to me. In one of his books, Watchman Nee says it this way. He said, we all come into the world, little children with empty hands. And so we say to God, Lord, would you please fill my hands with your blessings? And because God is good, you know what he does? He fills our hands with every blessing. He fills our hands with life and breath and hearing and speech and hands that move and eyes that can see and ears that can hear and legs that can move and hands that can move. And eventually we crawl and then we walk and we can eat. And he gives us moms and dads and he gives us a home and he gives us friends. And we go to school and he gives us education and we learn and we grow. And eventually maybe we get married and we have kids and we have grandkids. And he gives us a job and money and another job and more money and opportunities and cars to drive and clothes in the closet and finally and all the other trinkets of this life. And eventually our hands are filled to overflowing with the blessings of God. And then God says to us, my child, reach out your hand and put your hand in my hand and let us walk together in close fellowship. And we go, Lord, I'm sorry, I'd love to, but my hands are full. And God says, that's okay. Set all that aside and just reach out your hand and put your hand in my hand and let us walk together in close fellowship. And we go, Lord, I can't do it. My hands are too full. And God says, I know they're full. They're full with blessings I gave you. Everything you have comes from me. Put it aside and reach out your hand and put your hand in my hand and let's walk together in close fellowship. And we say, no, God, I can't. And the Lord says, you must. And we grab all those blessings. We wrap our fingers around them. And one by one, God pulls our fingers off the things we thought we couldn't live without. And you know what happens? When he gets down to the thumb, we start fighting back. But as the wise man said, your arms are too short to box with God. You will never win that battle. And it's little by little, he pulls our thumb away and he takes back that which always belonged to him in the first place. Hold lightly, friends, what you value greatly. It isn't yours anyway. Hold lightly what you value greatly. It all belongs to God. That's the lesson Moses is learning. First word is oppression. Second word is frustration. Third word is lamentation. End of the chapter. Now Moses is alone with the Lord. Pharaoh has turned him down. His own people have turned against him. So he goes and says in verse 22, "Oh Lord, why have you brought trouble upon this people? Is this why you sent me, Lord?" So this was plan A. How about let's go to plan B right now? Because plan A is a disaster. Look what he says in verse 22, into the chapter, verse 23. "Ever since I went to Pharaoh, I went in your name." When I read this, it reminds me, remember Adam in the garden? "The woman you gave me." It's just like that. "Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble upon this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. Your. Lord, what are you doing?" We've all had those kind of questions. "Lord, what kind of plan is this? I did my part. Why didn't you do yours? You have not rescued your people at all. Lord, I played by the rules. I did what you said, and it didn't work." Moses, and my dear friends, it's all going to work out. Just not the way you expect. So right over this chapter, one word: hopeless, failure, catastrophe. And then right underneath it, two words: but God. But God. Moses was still God's man. This was still God's plan. Nothing has happened by accident. God knows what he's doing. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean God isn't at work. It just means he's working behind the scenes. 3 lessons for today, and we're done. Lesson number 1. God's will often includes early opposition. We don't preach about this as much as we ought to. God's will often involves early opposition. You know what it's like? It's like when you go to the doctor and get a shot. The redness around the injection site is a sign the antibodies are working, and it's taking. That early opposition is like that. Pharaoh said, "I do not know the Lord." He's about to know him very well. You see, there's only 2 ways to know the Lord: either as deliverer or as destroyer. There's no third way. Since he would not know God as his deliverer, he would soon know him as the destroyer. And his people, the Egyptian people, would suffer terribly as a result. You see, the Lord is either your best friend or he's your worst enemy. And there's nothing in between. And all this means Pharaoh's hard heart, and that's another whole sermon, but Pharaoh's heart was hard anyway. It's not like he ever loved the Jews. He liked the free slave labor. Pharaoh's heart was hard, and God hardened it more and more and more. And all of that was ordained by God as the only way to set the people free. So that's number 1. God's will often includes early opposition. Number 2, God's timetable and ours are not the same. Now, a question. At this moment in time, after this just catastrophic fail here in Exodus 5, what did Moses know about what was about to happen? He didn't know anything except what God had told him. And God had only given him a little snippets here and there. Did Moses know about the boils and the bugs and the lice and the locusts and the hail? Did he know specifically about that? As I read the text, I don't think so. I can guarantee you, he didn't know anything about the showdown at the Red Sea. Does he know that eventually he's going to go up on Mount Sinai, he's going to talk to God face to face, and he's going to bring the 10 commandments inscribed by the finger of God, bring them down to his people? He doesn't know anything about that. But listen, at this moment in the story, if Moses has any hope of doing God's will, he's got to now do the one thing he absolutely does not want to do. He's got to go back and talk to Pharaoh again. Tip, foreshadowing here, it's not going to work out any better. And 9 times after that, he's going to go back and it's still not going to work out. But listen, you cannot bypass this part of your spiritual journey. You can't say, well, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. There is no advanced placement exam you can take to get out of the struggles and trials of life. Listen, you'll never get to Sinai without passing through the Red Sea. You'll never get to the Red Sea without the 10 plagues. You'll never get to the 10 plagues without going back to Pharaoh. And you will never go back to Pharaoh unless you ignore your critics. So, I was thinking about all this, and a verse came to mind. Job 23:10. If I have a life verse, this is it. He knows the way that I take. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. When I was a young kid, a long time ago, I read that verse and I was jazzed about the gold. I knew it's not literal gold, but still a very cool idea. Come forth as gold. Gold of Christian character. God's going to make gold out of me or in me or something. Right, it's really nice. Now that I am 69 years old, you know what I like about that verse? First two words, he knows. That's the comfort now. He knows. He knows. You see, life is a journey with many twists and turns. As I approach my 70th birthday next month, a shocking thought, but there it is. I find at this moment, I believe in the sovereignty of God now more than ever before. I have what I have because God willed me to have it. I live where I live because God has willed me to live there. I was born in Tennessee, raised in Alabama, met my wife in Chattanooga. We got married in Mesa, Arizona. We've moved 12 times in 48 years. We're going to celebrate our 48th anniversary in 2 weeks. We've lived in Dallas, Texas, Midlothian, Texas, Downey, California, Garland, Texas, Oak Park, Illinois, Tupelo, Mississippi, Dallas, Texas, and now we live in Shawnee, Kansas. All of it by the hand of God. We have 3 sons, 3 daughters-in-law, and 11 grandkids because God has willed it so. We have a beautiful 2-year-old Aussie Doodle named Sadie. She's a pandemic puppy. Remember when we were all locked down? Couldn't get out of the house? We were lonely. So we got this puppy, Sadie. She's the light of life to us. That too is the gift of God. And even my problems, which to me, compared to a lot of the people, are not very many, they're apportioned to me by the hand of a loving God. I am what I am and who I am and where I am by the sovereign grace of God. And you know what that means? That means in my life and in yours, there is no such thing as luck or chance or fate. There's only the good hand, the loving hand, the all-wise hand of an all-wise God. So I read about the little girl who was asked by her mom, what did you learn in Sunday school today? And she said, I learned God never says, oops. I like that because we live in an oops world where crazy stuff happens all the time. And often crazy stuff happens caused by really good people. But listen, this is an oops world, but we do not have an oops God. He makes no mistakes. He knows what he's doing, even when I don't have a clue, which is most of the time nowadays. I'm happy about that. I'm happy that God knows because I sure don't. Third and finally, God's power works best in our weakness. God's power works best in our weakness. Moses has been rebuffed, refused, rejected, but God is not finished yet. Got to read on to the end of the story. There's a happy ending coming, but there's more trouble to get through. It is so easy for all of us to get puffed up. So easy. Start thinking we are indispensable. But as Charles de Gaulle said, the graveyards are filled with indispensable men. You want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans. It's a great advance spiritually when you come to understand God doesn't need us to do anything. There's a lot more of us where we came from. Remember what Jesus said? If you don't let the children sing praises, God will raise up praise from the stones of the ground. He spoke, and the stars began to shine. He spoke, and the rabbit hopped across the meadow. He spoke, and the fish began to swim. He spoke, and the eagle soared across the sky. God can work with us. He can work without us. Let me say this another way. God was doing just fine as God before we ever showed up. He'll do just fine as God after we are gone. They say this poem, the poem of an unknown soldier, was found on the body of a soldier who died on the battlefield during the American Civil War. I asked God for strength that I might achieve. I was made weak that I might learn humbly to obey. I asked for health that I might do greater things. I was given infirmity that I might do better things. I asked for riches that I might be happy. I was given poverty that I might be wise. I asked for power that I might have the praise of men. I was given weakness that I might feel my need of God. I asked for all things that I might enjoy life. I was given life that I might enjoy all things. I got nothing that I asked for, but everything I had hoped for. Almost despite myself, my unspoken prayers were answered. I am among men most richly blessed. Friends, life is not a straight line. For all of us, plenty of detours. Drive the car of life into a cul-de-sac and got to turn around and come out. Life zigs and it zags. Some of you are zigging when you wish you were zagging. Some of you are zagging this morning when you wish you were zigging. Some of you feel like you're just going around in circles. One day the fog is going to lift, and you're going to discover you weren't going around in circles. You were following the path of God, around and around, to the top of the mountain of God's purpose for your life. God knows what He's doing, even when we don't have a clue. I go and preach every once in a while at a big Bible conference in Michigan, Muskegon, Michigan. Outdoor, big tabernacle, big platform. And above the pulpit, but in the overhang, there's a little plaque up there. And it looks like it's been there for 60 years. So it's probably been there 80 years. This is a little thing. But I think about it every time I go preach there. It says, let go and let God. It's great. My observation is the letting God is not that hard. It's the letting go that gives us all a problem. I got to wrap up now. Folks, everything's going to work out. Just not the way you expect. To my younger self, I would say, hold your dreams lightly. Everything will work out if you just follow the Lord. I knew that when I was 30. I believe it now. And that makes all the difference.